Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 43 of the Titanforge podcast. My name is Dratnos, joined, as always, with no technical difficulties by Tettles.
Hello, Dratnos. Welcome to my Twitch page.
Thank you. I'm glad to not put any, any broken content on your Twitch channel.
Don't worry. My Twitch channel is full of broken content because I'm mostly here.
Yeah, you do play Moonkin on it. And also joining us is Terrell.
Howdy.
Howdy.
We faunted right before the poll, but then the poll was scupped, so now our damage is...
Yeah, that's true. I did put my hands up in the air 20 seconds before we started the show. I've been playing a little bit of Fire Mage recently, so that the 17-second font has been entering my life. It's actually really annoying to have to like you hear the pull timer go up and you just have to immediately see if it's 20 seconds and then start fonting.
It reminded me of the time in MDI last season where Warrior charged into a pack on King's Rest and then immediately jumped off the edge of the bridge.
Yes, that was pretty much what we did here with this intro. That was the East Cup font or East Cup King's Rest, right? The 42-minute one.
Yeah.
That one was wild. Although it's easy for things to go wrong in King's Rest. There's a lot of opportunities for stuff to go bad.
We had a match kind of like that in KSM with your team, I think.
Yeah, we wiped to Dazar twice. Method and I wiped to it once. Yeah.
He didn't run back Shadow of Zul to the entrance and get corpse camped by it, though. I think it was a little bit different.
No, although yesterday I did do an alt key in King's Rest where that did happen. We wiped to Shadow of Zul 5 times and went from being on track to time the key to 20 minutes over.
Oh my gosh. All right, anyway.
It was a 20 and our tank was a Prot Warrior, and that is not an easy thing to do if your tank is a Prot Warrior.
And Grievous.
Yeah, Grievous Fortified Shadow of Zul does not mess around. I think that is by far the hardest thing in Mythic Plus this week. I think that Grievous Fortified Shadow of Zul is 4 keystone levels higher than it shows, basically.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Grievous Full Call, probably a little bit.
Grievous Full Call, yeah. Although Grievous Full Call on Fortified isn't too bad, right? Grievous Tyrannical Full Call. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or a Heartsbane Triad gets really toxic too. Where Heartsbane Triad, you just have Grievous ticking and everybody is in the healing reduction aura. That's nasty. We've got a Grievous Last Boss of Junkyard, says Shift in chat, not to be underestimated. Also Grievous Gunker,
true, actually.
Right?
I think Gunker is a little bit worse than HK, but maybe.
Yeah. Do you guys? Speaking of Gunker, do you guys know that you can dispel the robots off of they're getting gooped? Yeah.
That's a disease dispel.
Yeah, you gotta the easiest way I think is you just focus the melee one and then you can click on it and its focus frame and dispel it. Yeah.
I'm surprised that you didn't know that until now.
I knew it. I did 2 keys at Junkyard where people didn't know that, and I was like, oh, okay.
Okay, that makes sense.
Let's spread this information. Anyways, as some of you who are watching live have no doubt discovered, we are now live on Tettles' channel. That's going to be the game plan going forward for the foreseeable future. We're going to try and not shift things or change things up too often. So we'll be here for a while. And then at some point in maybe another year, we'll go over to Trell's channel and complete the triangle. Something like that.
It's ironic because I can't do a triangle.
Yeah. maybe for a couple of weeks we'll just stream with an invalid stream key and to simulate Trell making a triangle. Okay, so that is the plan there. Speaking of scheduling changes, the MDI is now upon us. So starting next weekend actually is our first MDI Cup weekend. So that means that for the next 6 weekends, we are not going to be doing this show at the same time as we usually did. So we usually record live on Saturdays, and then we have the show come out on Sundays. We're not 100% sure yet, but we're going to be probably moving to a Wednesday recording time, and then a Thursday audio and YouTube live time. That's not 100% sure, but it's pretty likely. So pretty likely that the next show is going to be in 5 days instead of 7, or I guess 4 days instead of 7. That's going to be this coming Wednesday, and then we're going to leave the weekends to the MDI. which I think it's good because otherwise, if we went live at our normal time, that would overlap with the MDI, and I think that kind of defeats the purpose.
That's a pretty big conflict of interest for all of us.
Right, especially because you're going to be busy competing in them half the time, hopefully.
Yeah, I sure hope so.
If
Drat started the flame there at the end.
you know, as long as the time trials go well, it's never guaranteed. Some teams have missed time trials.
You only get 5 attempts. Sometimes they go horribly wrong.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about the time trial format, because so the way time trial format works is there's like a period of several days where you get practice runs or real runs, right? And you have to decide. You basically can talk to this turnip to change it between practice and non-practice mode, which is a new thing for this MDI compared to previous times. And it's nice because before it would basically be like 5 practice days and then 2 real days, and you got your 5 attempts across those 2 real days. And now there's a longer, like the time you can just choose whether to do practice runs or real runs. I think that's awesome. So I think that's a move in a good direction. We are in the middle of a time trial period for EU right now. NA is not doing anything though. We have the time trial dungeons. They're all at 19. Trell, what do you think about the decision for MDI to be on 19s?
I don't know what to think about it. I think it's good in the sense that everything is a lot more challenging. I think it's bad in the sense that some matches are going to be like 25 minutes long at on average. I think for like King's Rest and maybe even workshop stuff like that can go on really long on the right affixes because you just can't pull big and slog through the gated pulls over and over and over again in King's Rest. The other thing is I think 19 Tyrannical leads to some bad one-shot opportunities. Like the first boss of Freehold is likely to actually kill someone in the cup on 19.
Yeah,
otherwise
Tyrannical, right? Yeah, it's tough because like we've gotten so high on damage that if the Keystone level is as low as like 16 in the Keystone Masters was, you could actually just one-shot packs before they did anything important.
Yeah.
You
still can on Tyrannical 19s, by the way. It's just forward is going to be very challenging.
Tettles, how about you? What do you think about the MDI Keystone level here?
I think I do wonder if there could be like a format shift to where the Keystones are either like, so say the players were playing them on like 20s or 21s and then like having to go like significantly slower, or going on like 15s or 16 where they're not going to be one shot. I think right now there's like a weird middle ground that we're in where it's like 17, 18, 19 feel like almost effectively the same, except the consistency is the only thing that's going to vary between those 3 levels. That's just how it's like viewed by me, but maybe that's not the case.
Yeah, I do worry that on a 17 there would be, and it would be really easy to like pull massive compared to what is actually realistic, like and what actually looks somewhat like live. It is interesting. Trell, do you think Tyrannical is an easier MDI affix than Fortified?
Yes, in general. It just depends on like the affix combos and the pulls that you can do with the boss. Like some things like Tyrannical, Waycrest, Necrotic would be really, really hard. But if it wasn't Necrotic, then it would probably be really easy compared to Fort.
Yeah,
so, I don't know. It's hard to say.
Tyrannical Waycrest, Necrotic Waycrest in general, really rough. Okay, so we also have some other MDI news. The Eternal Palace trinkets have made their way onto the tournament realm after they weren't there last month, but this month now they've showed up. And that is including Azara's Font of Power, which might allow some specs to make their way in, particularly Fire Mage.
Some specs.
Yeah, but...
How many Fire Mages do you think complained to get them to add that trinket in the day time trial started?
I don't know, but I think it's cool to see. I think it's good to see the Font of Power in there. I think that it's a good change. I think it does make the MDI look more like live keys, right? To have access to those trinkets. Yeah.
Well, anything that can boost up representations of specs and classes in the MDI is normally seen as something that is a change for the better. Yeah,
because last MDI, Fire Mage didn't have bracers. Now they've got bracers. That's a lot better. Let me tell you.
I forgot about that.
Those bracers are really, really, really good. But last MDI, they didn't want to put them in because they scaled every item to like 445 last MDI. This MDI, they've actually got the technology to not do scaling anymore. And so you can have items of different item levels and it matters. So for instance, like the 485 N'Zoth pieces are sometimes better than the 475 ones with better stats because they're higher item level. And now you've got low item level Fonta power available, which is realistic, right? That's like how it is on live keys.
Unfortunately, I don't think it's going to be enough to get Mage into MDI settings. I think there might be one niche case, kind of like in Legion where, well, actually previous in this expansion, Toldagor was a Mage key for Frost. But for Fire Mage, I don't know. You may see them like once in Workshop or something, and that's it.
Yeah, Workshop. Everybody's just so experienced playing Fire Mage in Workshop because they had to get their bracers from that dungeon anyway, so that's why it's such a good dungeon for, yeah, exactly.
God damn it.
How about the other Eternal Palace trinkets? Do you think there's any chance that people are going to play something like Urchin or Nautilus or Coral?
I think Nautilus could see play on Explosive from like a healer.
Right.
That's a good point, yeah, actually. I was thinking tank trinkets, I guess. I don't think Urchin's going to see play for tanks.
Yeah, Urchin and Edicts, they were really powerful, but 30 item levels is a lot. N'Zoth trinket that's 40 item levels against that, and that's such a good one as well.
Yeah, it's on demand too.
The N'Zoth trinket's really, really good. That thing owns.
It also gets double effectiveness whenever you're in the realm.
I think it also gets double effectiveness if you're fighting awakened enemies with the last boss. I'm not sure, but
Is that true?
I think it does. Yeah, I remember. So yesterday I tanked like a freehold key, and we did an obelisk with the last boss. And I have a weak aura that shows how much is on that shield, and I pressed it, and it looked like way more than usual.
Yeah, it's getting the Nihilotha effectiveness.
Yeah, good.
It could have been Celestial Forge.
Yeah, it also gets it on Shrine of the Storm last boss too, from what I understand, but I don't know why.
Weird.
I know.
I'm pretty skeptical, but that's sweet if it works.
Maybe it's just maybe there's a set of like faceless enemies that if you're in combat with that, or like Nihilothan enemies, and it checks if you're in combat with those. Something.
I don't know. Weird game, dude.
Yeah, I guess that is a boss with phases, right? So maybe it does that. Anyways, either way, even without it, the Nihilotha benefit, that trinket is really, really good. With the Nihilotha benefit, it's just absurd. Okay, let's move on. So before we advance to our main topic this week, which I guess we should talk about what it is, we're going to quickly talk about whether or not push weeks exist this season. And then we're also going to talk about, as our really main thing, identifying their group's strengths and weaknesses. So this is going to be something that, this is something we've been asked about a lot. We've often been asked, like, how do I make, off-meta comps work? That kind of thing. And this is, I think, our attempt to make this a topic that's relevant for everybody. So we're going to talk about why certain types of comps work better than others, and then what adjustments you can make based on what things are going on in your comp. So whether you have the things that are the most popular or not, how that opens up or closes your options down in various keys. So that's our main topic. So hopefully that's one that you guys will like. But first, we got some shout outs to distribute here. Many shout outs here. The list is growing. Thanks so much for that. This is our list of supporters at patreon.com/Titanforge. They are Paul of US Proudmore, King of Skills, VTech XD, Zuko, Jaw, Uncle Please Invite, Drunk Swede from Legion of Lemmings, Argent Dawn EU, I Wish I Was Dratnus' Dino Pillow, Tootsie, Heltari, Ishio, Blue of Emerald Dream, Chromed, Seraphicus, Trekkie, The Marsh Hare, Regulus, Never Nude, Grizzjam, Chewy, Delete Toldagor, Welcome Treldagor, Coke Dogs Gopher, Give Us Zool in Shadowlands, Worgen Death is a Paper Tank, Rude Dinosaur, and Raiten of the Guild on Tarn Mill, recruiting by the way, who's they've gotten a 0% wipe on Hive Mind, so good luck to them taking that thing all the way down. Thanks so much for the support, everybody, and keep the ridiculous names coming. You can always add us in Discord if you're on this list and you want your name to be something different, and we'll change it.
I wish I was Dratnus' Dino Pillow.
Yeah, I've got that. Actually, I've still got that here, even though the bed isn't in this room anymore where I stream from. It's I put the Dino Pillow in the background. Yeah.
Is it in quarantine?
Yeah. It's social distancing. It's 6 feet away from me. Okay. So our main topic this week is push weeks. Do they exist? Tettles, this was your topic idea. What's the kind of, I guess, what's the counter argument? Why would push weeks not exist this season?
Well, ultimately, I feel like there's less push weeks. I don't know. I think push weeks are always going to exist in some form or fashion, just with how the affix system works. Plus, the goal is to complete the highest level key, right? I think ultimately, though, this topic wasn't necessarily supposed to say no, push weeks don't exist, but it's going to be more of like focusing on how keys are a little bit more open this season in terms of like higher level keys and like easier weeks are significantly more readily available.
Yeah. So for context, last season there was one push week, and there was like
a half of another one.
There was like the half good fortified week that wasn't a push week, and there was tyrannical push week, which was also not a push week, and then there was that one week that was like bursting volcanic fortified enchanted. That week was so good, and then every other week was so bad compared. It was either tyrannical or void or bolstering or whatever, and you're just like, you couldn't play.
Or tides.
Yeah, or tides. It was so bad last season. This season, there's a much wider range, right? There are a lot of good weeks. So, for instance, this week is Sanguine Grievous Fortified. That's a pretty good week. There's a lot of teams that are pushing keys this week, and there are better weeks than this one as well. But this week is one where teams at least feel able to push keys. Last season, that wasn't really true, right? Last season, teams maybe played on the bad weeks, but you weren't getting keys at the same level as you could do on push week. I think
it's just still evolving so much. Our power is gaining rapidly every week still. It's like not even close to hitting the ceiling. And so I think push weeks won't even be in question until it finally stops. I don't even know if it will stop. You know if the corruption level...
I don't think it does. I don't think it does until Shadowlands hits. Or at least pre-patch or whatever.
And you get +3 corruption resistance on your cloak every time. Dratnos and I were talking about this a little bit, and his counter argument was the difference between the best week and the worst week is not 50 corruption, I don't believe. And I was like, you know what? I think you're probably right.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like if you could like pay a corruption handicap to get a good week versus a bad week, you'd be willing to pay quite a bit of corruption, I think, to turn off some of the bad weeks and turn on the good weeks.
Yeah, if it did have a cap though, let's say it ended in like 6 weeks or something. Obviously, there are always some weeks that won't necessarily be as easy to push keys on because some affixes just add time to the dungeon, like explosive on bosses adds time. Bolstering adds time for sure, even if you play the dungeon perfectly.
Sure.
Sanguine and Grievous can potentially not add any time to the dungeon, which is why this week is always considered one.
Yeah, there's also Sanguine Quaking Fortified coming up in a couple weeks. That is, I think, it's just a better version of this week because I think Quaking is easier than Grievous. Now that they changed Quaking. So that I think is
wonderful now. I like it.
Yeah, one thing that is also happening, there's the A versus B patterns of Awakened. Tettles, do you think that it ever matters which of those Awakened patterns is active?
So, personally, I actually don't think any of the dungeons, the A versus B pattern matters, except for in Ataldazar. And the reason for that is because, like, the Ataldazar obelisks, you can either get the blob or the spider off into that corner in that double honor guard pack, and in an ideal route, that's the obelisk that you're going to want to play with Yasma, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the spider is significantly more challenging than the blob to play with Yasma due to just like a multitude of factors. So ideally, you would have the blob, and I think that's the only one that really affects like your ability to be able to time the key. Maybe you guys have a different opinion though.
I think you're right that Ataldazar is the one where it matters the most. I do think Underot, though, it also is relevant whether or not the blob or the fear guy is in that one over in the corner with the worms. But yeah, I don't think it changes whether or not it's like a push week ever, which is such a big difference from last season, right? Last season, the difference between Enchanted and Tides and Void weeks was massive. Whereas now it's like, big. This is a marginal thing that might matter in Ataldazar. But even if it matters for the timer, it doesn't matter in terms of like whether or not you feel like you can play the key.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. You just have to make a different route. Like there are a lot of comps that can't play Spider with Yasma just because of how kicks end up working. I guess we're going to talk about that. That's going to be like part of the scope of the show, even, right?
Yeah, definitely. Like which comps can handle different Awakened bosses with the end boss. Absolutely. How about Tyrannical this season? Trell, do you think there's a possibility that teams will be pushing on Tyrannical at all this season?
Not for the highest level keys. Tyrannical scaled out of hand once you get above 18, 19, I think we could agree on. I think for teams learning the dungeons and getting into Mythic Plus above 15s, Tyrannical is actually easier up until 19s because you only have to deal with about 4 to 5 hard bosses in the dungeon and the rest of the trash is a lot easier. Whereas Fortified makes you have to learn like 7 to 8 pretty difficult pulls in each dungeon.
Yeah, I think you're right. That, like, you know, we might see some odd times showing up on tyrannical weeks, but it's going to be like the top 20 times this season is going to be like 18 fortified times and 2 tyrannical times or something.
Yeah, well, I mean, there is that bursting skittish tyrannical week that is
Really
optimal
good.
for a cup. It's like that is absolutely the Motherload push week. That is the Motherload to fix that. Everything else is probably their highest key is probably going to be done on a fortified week, though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, looking back, you know, Tyrannical was best in season 1. Like every push week was on Tyrannical because the throughput for healers and damage just wasn't there to survive trash and keep it in one. But now, late in the expansion, the same thing happened in Legion, I think. The scaling is just so high that like when bosses get 40% more health, their phases just last so much longer and they start one-shotting people around 20s, and it's just a mess.
Yeah, I think you're right. Also, we have a lot of like AoE tools that we've gotten as the expansion's gone on, right? We've gotten like, you know, Aegis for tanks has made them pretty tanky against fortified trash, and
that's actually insane. I didn't even think about like how stuff has evolved in terms of just like AoE damage profiles are so more readily available now. That's actually I bet that is actually a big reason that fortified
like essences. Almost every class plays a major essence that's good in AoE. And that
Exactly.
like blast AoE damage, right? Like Blood of the Enemy or Focusing Iris or whatever represents a huge amount of AoE damage. A lot of the Azurite trait builds and stuff also like are ones that, you know, they usually the good ones do some single target too, but we've scaled up bigly in AoE.
I mean, can you imagine can you imagine if you had to play Condensed Life Force or Crucible of Flame,
right,
as your essences? Like that wouldn't affect AoE at all. It's like, who cares?
Yeah, that would be interesting, and you know, it's not like Crucible of Flame is a bad essence, right? Like if that would be still much better than not having any essences. That thing is really strong. It's just the stuff that's flexible and that does both is way more valuable, and so that's always what gets picked. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see how push weeks develop this season. I do think that one thing that the +3 corruption resistance every week means that the keystone levels are just gonna keep getting higher, right? Like you're not gonna be able to show up in like 3 weeks for whatever push week you determine is best, and like put up a set of times and then just be done for the expansion. Like your times are going to get beaten when that week comes back around in 12 weeks at the very least, and everybody has another 36 corruption resistance, right?
Exactly. At 36 corruption resistance
that's a lot.
Ridiculous amount. Yeah. That's like 2 more corruption pieces for a lot of people.
That's like 20% more versatility.
Yeah, it's a ridiculous amount of stats. Absolutely, or it's like, you know, 10% Twilight Dev Beam or something, 8% Twilight Dev Beam, and for tanks it even scales your defenses, right? Because it's more Surging Vitality you can put on, and more verse from all sources, so it does even increase that. So yeah, it's gonna be fun to keep track of. Let's move on though to our tip of the week. My tip of the week is that you can actually save your lesser vision quests. Apparently, except for the eyeball one, you can have the others all in your quest log, you know, and come back the next day and do the lesser vision and accomplish both quests in it. I've learned this the hard way on some potato alts, namely, you know, item level 390 Shadow Priest or whatever, who just died in a lesser vision to auto attacks or whatever before I finished my quest.
Oh,
so imagine. You're the first person I've ever heard who's failed a lesser vision due to death.
I did it on a Warlock also. I've those 2 characters have both failed lesser visions, but you show back up the next day and you can complete that quest, so it's fine.
So I wrote except for the eyeball one. So technically you can save the quest, but whenever you use like the potion, the eyeballs are just not there anymore.
Oh, that's so weird. Okay.
It's really bad, yeah. And then eventually the eyeball quest comes back around and then you lose it and you're like...
Right, yeah. So once it gets back to the quest that you already have in your log, then you're in trouble. Then you missed out. But yeah, you can save up and do multiple lesser visions in the same day. And it usually takes a while before it repeats the quest anyway. Like I think that it goes through all of them before it starts cycling back. But I can't prove it. Trell, what is your tip of the week?
My tip of the week is the bug in Workshop where you would stack things inside of the hammer, like Tuttle showed last week on our, is now fixed, luckily. After that came out and people kind of knew about that the few days preceding, people started making videos of stacking auto hammers on the hammers in Workshop on the first boss, the Tussle Tonks. So they had like 70 auto hammers on the big hammer, and so when it swung down to hit the tank, it would one shot the tank and then lag out everybody in the dungeon for like 10 seconds because it did so much CPU work for some reason.
Yeah, it's calculating every entity. It's taking a unique hit, and that's just like a lot of entities, right?
Yeah, the swirly, like you could tell the swirly was just way thicker than usual because there were like 70 swirlies on that spot. Yeah. that was a wild
so
bug. Uh-huh.
Sometimes it just slips past QA, I guess, but they at least fix it quickly, and I'm glad because now nobody has to do that in MDI and just that is just not good gameplay.
Yeah, I think that even if they hadn't fixed it in time in the MDI, they probably would have told people to not put auto hammers in that thing. Because that was really stupid.
That's the Shadow of Zul. You should not do that.
Yeah. All right. Tettles, as always, has a clip of the week instead of a tip of the week. This one comes from Shrine of the Storm. Let's take a look here at what happened in Tettles' Key on this very own Twitch channel.
It's inevitable that I die.
A couple days ago. Sitting here in the jacuzzi.
I obtained a weak aura that shows me how many ticks I have left, and I'm like, oh, there's 4 left, and then I walk into the balls and just died. I'm like, oh man.
It did work.
Oh, it worked.
It did work.
Turtles, no.
It did work.
Okay, hang on, let's take a look. Yeah, gather orbs. 4. Maybe you ticked again after it said 4.
Maybe
something like that.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't think that was 4 orbs. I think it was most of it. I think that was a lot of orbs.
For anybody who wants to investigate, here's that clip in chat. It's called "I Died Just a Little," and that is Tettles versus Lord Stormsong. Unfortunate.
We were joking like 10 minutes before that I didn't have a clip of the week either.
That's the thing, is any key with Tettles can quickly become a clip of the week key. It's called the Tettles effect, and it can happen to your key too.
Man, I timed a 24 junkyard. Please put respect on my name.
Oh wow, did you? Was your top damage from a Moonkin ability or from a junkyard ability?
God damn it.
Has anybody's top damage in junkyard ever been from their class's own ability?
No. I mean, has anybody's top damage this season been from from a class ability, even not in Junkyard? Probably not, right? It's been Twilight Devastation. Yeah. All right. Let's move on to our actual main topic now. Only 30 minutes later. So this week, our main topic is identifying groups' strengths and weaknesses. So you take a look at your composition of 5 people and determine what that means for your dungeon. And I think this is something that can really help you out, especially like one of the things that a lot of groups will do is they'll just do the dungeon like they have the normal comp or whatever, the one that they see on streams and everything, the one that does all the 26s. But I think that you should be making more adjustments, and as your group has different sets of people in it, that's going to mean that some pulls that work for other groups don't work for you. And that you have some pulls and boss fights that you can do that others can't do. And in order to time the dungeon, you need to be taking advantage of those things. So we're going to talk about all those things that we could come up with. Kind of a good rule of thumb, though, is that if somebody is good at some weird spec or whatever, they should help you identify what that means for your group's run, right? So if you're playing with like an enhancement shaman and you haven't seen an enhancement shaman all season, hopefully they're somebody who's able to tell you like, okay, I have tremor totem for this or whatever, and that means you can do this, and that kind of thing can help you know that rather than having to try and figure out what it means when you've got that new spec in your group,
or like multiple like the 12-second lockout, the 12-second kick is so useful in so many different situations that the enhancement shaman can be like, I can solo kick this, I don't need any help.
Right, like Thugs and Toldagor. Exactly, yeah, you're just like, I got this. No, normally that's a 2 melee kick rotation. It's a 1 shaman rotation, right?
Or the lashers inside of Underrot. Sometimes they'll get desynced where it's no longer a 1 melee kick rotation, but with shaman it's always a 1 melee kick rotation, so they don't have to like put anything on stun DR.
Yeah, that's a great point. So those sorts of things are it's nice to know all those things as somebody, it's just nice to know what all the specs do. But in practice, if you are playing one of those weird specs, you should take it on yourself to help the group know what you can do, because most groups probably aren't going to know those things.
I mean, I think everybody's playing a weird spec, right?
Not necessarily, right? Like if you're playing like Prot Warrior or whatever, people kind of know how Reflect works, and like there's a lot of built-in kind of group understanding of those Outlaw Rogue things and Prot Warrior things and Resto Druid things. Like to some extent, yeah, you're still going to benefit by telling everybody like, okay, I'll reflect this or whatever, but it's not, you don't need to explain how your class works really in the same way. I don't think.
I would agree that you don't have to explain it in the same way, though. That is correct.
I do think it's good to just always be communicative, though. Like, I'm gouging this or whatever. I get this with this, even if it's your more common spec. Anyways, let's start.
People just tend to know what the default specs do. Like people just understand what Resto Druid, Prot Warrior, Rogue, Demon Hunter do. But then let's say they're used to run with a Prot Warrior and they have to run with a Brewmaster for the guild. A lot of times they're going to pull threat on pull because they don't have to think about like, oh, my Prot Warrior always thunderclaps instantly and gets all the mobs that are spread around him to get on his threat table right off the bat. But as a Brewmaster, they have to wait like one more second for the kick smash to be in range of all the mobs. And that's just like one of those little things that you should know playing with a different spec.
Yeah, or like first boss of Templus of Thralis, the fire mage is like, pull them on top of each other, and Tettles is like, get them away from each other. Social distancing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You are not allowed to bring those mobs within 8 yards of one another. Social distancing.
Yeah. So, okay, one of the kind of first things that can differentiate between different groups and isn't really even spec dependent is just the number of ranged or melee in the group. So let's talk about what happens if your group is all melee first, and then we'll start changing people to range and talk about what that changes. So for starters, if your group comp is 5 melee, there are some things that are going to get you that you didn't think were going to get you. So this happens when your healer counts as a melee spec as well. So this is like when Mistweaver Monks and Holy Paladins count as melee for the purposes of many mechanics, and this means that like the King's Rest slime room, for instance, normally those slimes will shoot swirlies at a ranged player. Your group doesn't have anybody who's flagged as ranged. Those are going to be going at everybody, and everybody's going to need to be dodging in melee all those swirlies.
Same with the oozes inside of Underrot too. Like a lot of the times, I think that the charge will end up like targeting ranged players more often than it will for melee. But like if you're running a full melee comp, it's going to just be in melee every single time, so you may end up getting hit by that. Also, like the harpooners and the charge from the matron in Underrot too. If you have everybody inside of melee, then it's just going to pick a random target.
Yeah, pouncers and Mechagon also. That's
the prowlers. Those are bitches.
Yeah, that is much worse actually on if you have one range than if you have none. If you have one range, those just all pounce on that one range. But if you have no range, they'll spread out among all the melee because they'll always target a ranged if one is available.
Yeah.
Siege of Borealis, first boss, right? That's one where if you have nobody who's flagged as ranged, it can just pick anybody. And that can be really toxic. So
I love to watch that, honestly. That makes my heart happy.
Yeah. It's always shocking. It's like, oh my god, I'm fixated as a tank on this boss. What happened? Oh, yeah. I'm a range.
Yeah. Then you always blame the healer, right? You blame whoever the Holy Paladin or Mistweaver is for that, because that's the person who's like not playing the ranged spec that is most noticeable. Freehold as well is a place where like, Skycap and Crag, somebody being out at range to bait is pretty important. And that, with nobody out doing that, things can start to get a little more scuffed. Even the Mistweaver can go out to range and bait there, so that does help. Trothak as well, like if 2 people aren't out, the sharks can go on anybody. So if your group comp doesn't have 2 people who are standing out, then that's going to be more difficult too. So mostly things get harder, yeah. When you have 5 melee, right, mostly things get... Like there are a couple of things that do get a little bit weirder.
It's important to note that some mechanics target range specs and some target players at range. Yes. Like the Juggernauts and the Taldazar will target the any player at range, not in melee. They don't have to be like a range specialization or a range healer.
I mean, it's the same with Razan. Razan will target players at range, not necessarily ranged DPS.
Right, yeah, whereas Trothak does that as well, but Siege of Borealis does not, right? Siege of Borealis first boss, he just targets people based on ranged specs, which is, is wild. Yes, very, very, very relevant. Okay, so then when you start making the switch to adding range to your group, kind of the standard amounts of people to be flagged as ranged in your group are 1 or 2, right? One and 2 ranged comps are the normal amounts to see in most dungeons. Usually that's like the healer and 1 ranged DPS, right? There things generally tend to behave pretty well, right? Is there anything you guys can think of that you need to really look out for if you have one person flagged as ranged?
I have this. The Voidweaver Malthier's kick, the curse will always go on that one ranged player because it's casting speed. Yes, so it will always target them. They're liable to die if they get overlapped.
That one actually goes on healers that are flagged as melee too. That'll target Mistweavers and Holy Paladins preferentially also.
Yes.
If you have no other, it's weird.
That's true. I just feel like that cast always targets my healer.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. It always prioritizes range too. Like, so if I'm in the group with another ranged healer, or like not even another ranged healer, but another healer, it will alternate between me and them. Not necessarily alternate, but it can pick either of us. But if it was just them and then like another melee would only pick them the whole entire time.
Yeah, it goes on casters, right? It's not like a range versus melee thing. It'll target casters, so it'll target Mistweavers and not BM hunters, right?
It doesn't target BM hunters?
Right, yeah, because they don't cast.
How? Do they just whitelist classes? Like, what the fuck do they pick? What?
Man, there's only 36 specs. It's not that hard to build a list of which ones are casters and which aren't.
I mean, I've just never seen them just, like... Okay, anyways.
But, yeah.
I mean, you know what I'm saying, right? I've never seen them be so, like...
It's a surprising...
BM hunters are ascended beings that have evolved from a melee spec to just cast around running around at range with.
It is true they do have a cast on Revive Pet. I don't know if you guys have seen this. There's a really good clip though of I'm Fired Up doing MDI practice on BM Hunter, just like opening his spellbook and hunting through to try and find Revive Pet in the middle of a pull.
That's what you love to see, honestly.
Yeah, it's really good. You guys should check that one out if you haven't seen it. Okay. So I would say though that having 1 or 2 players flagged as ranged in your group is like the normal things where most stuff happens as you would expect or that you usually see. That's kind of the standard for push groups is to have 1 or 2 players flagged as ranged. I'd say 2 this season because usually it's like Resto Druid Fire Mage or something like that, and that maybe 1 also for like Holy Paladin Fire Mage. Then once you start getting to like 3 players flagged as ranged, stuff starts to get weird again, right?
Yes. So Toldagor's last boss, Overseer Korgus, will put Explosive Burst on those 3 players every single time, making them just liable to die to doubles on a whim. It's really annoying. Plus, if you're playing 3 range, that at least at minimum, 2 of the DPS classes are ranged DPS and have a extended duration, like an extended lockout kick or extended duration kick. So that can be problematic for different reasons.
Right, so 3 ranged comps, you start to run into kick problems unless you're playing with Elemental or Resto Shamans in your comp, or Prop Paladins. Those are kind of,
True.
We'll talk about those later, but those are specs that give you some more kick flexibility and let you make the higher range numbers work out. But yeah, that's when you'll start to have stuff like second boss Shrine of the Storm getting a cast through on its like 7th cast or something. That's when you'll start to have problems with like last boss Shrine of the Storm casts, or just like packs of mobs, like, you know, first pull Shrine of the Storm. Wow, Shrine of the Storm has a lot of kicks, huh?
Yes,
yeah.
Shrine of the Storm does back up a lot of kicks. Right?
that place is wild, huh? All the places I'm thinking of where you get owned by not having kicks. Yeah. Toldagor last boss is an interesting point as well, because if you have like, I feel like 0 range is the best for Toldagor last boss because then it's just targets everybody randomly and it spreads it around nicely. But any range targets are guaranteed to get Explosive Burst on them. But then by contrast, if you go up to having 4 people flagged as ranged, then once again it'll target most of them.
Yes.
Like it'll float. People will get breaks as well.
I mean, it won't target your tank, which is
the best one. Yeah, that's. I think that's why 5 melee is so good, is because like it can target your tank and that doesn't matter. And it can, then it alternates between everybody else nicely as well.
Yeah. I do think ultimately, though, having that many ranged interrupts also puts you problematic with Voidweaver Malthier. Voidweaver Malthier requires 3, occasionally 4 kicks whenever, depending on when you lock her out. 4 melee kicks, by the way, depending on when you lock her out, which is not exactly doable for a lot of compositions or on a lot of bosses if you do want to play it with the bosses. So sometimes that 4 melee kick group comp will be advantageous just because purely of that.
Yeah, the extra, even if you don't have enough kicks for Mouthier, it can be okay, right? Like you can let some cast through, but usually not if you're fighting it with the boss. Then things start to get bad. Yeah, it's definitely something to look out for in your group, though. Playing 4 ranged in some dungeons can be really good. I think like Freehold, for example, is a dungeon where if your group is like all ranged, yeah, fighting the spider with Harlan gets weird, but the first boss becomes totally free, and is never going to be hitting anybody with a shot. That's kind of cool.
Temple of Sethralus also doesn't punish you for playing with double range. I'm sure it's not advantageous, but there's no real drawback to playing double range. I think that's like most of it. There are a lot of dungeons where there isn't like a unique drawback, probably let's say 60 to 70% of them. But ultimately, there are some dungeons with major drawbacks, like we were stating, like Shrine of the Storm and Tol Dagor, where playing a bunch of ranged DPS is going to be incredibly problematic. And are you really going to lob a couple players just so you can do those dungeons?
Right, that's the thing, is like the melee groups work in the range favor dungeons. So, you can't really pick which dungeon your push group is going to do, right? You're doing all of them that week.
Yeah.
Unless you're swapping between players, which usually you aren't. Yeah, that's usually why the meta has kind of shifted down to 1 ranged groups, being the most popular option. And then maybe a healer also flagged as ranged. Okay. Let's talk about another thing that affects your group, which is how much your group's damage is built around cooldowns versus how much it doesn't care about those sorts of things. Because this will really affect your cadence of pulls, right? And also this affects how your tank should be playing too. So the biggest example of like DPS that is cooldown dependent is Fire Mage, right? Fire Mage is far and away the one where if you're not pulling around the Fire Mage, you're going to be losing time. And if you are pulling around the Fire Mage, they can make some ridiculously big pulls work out very, very nicely.
Yes.
Yeah, so Trell, as a tank, how does the game change for you when you've got a Fire Mage in your group versus when you don't?
I think it's really important that you actually map out your pulls to where you have like a really big pull and then a small pull and then a really big pull again and then another small. If you can do that successfully, then you're gonna have a much better time because everything in those big pulls is gonna die pretty quickly. I'd say like I take my normal route, which would be a good like kind of roughly the same size pulls over and over, and just like add 1 mob to the bigger segment and then take 1 away from the little segment here and there. I think the perfect example is an Underrot right before Spore Caller Zancha. There's the skeleton pack that people pull.
Mm-hmm.
If you add the Witch Doctor from the two mob patrol to the left of it, that's a really good Fire Mage pull. Like you just do that with a Fire Mage, they'll combust on the Witch Doctor and it'll affect all the skeletons. And then without it, you maybe want to just start the skeletons without a Fire Mage. You start the skeletons, you kill the Death Speaker, and then you chain into the 2-pack instead. That's the other option.
Right, yeah. Doing more kind of like chain pulling when you have sustained damage in your group versus pulling it all at once when you have the Fire Mage in your group. Very much the same. There are some other specs that are like this as well. So Destruction Warlock also plays on like a 2-minute cooldown with Summon Infernal and Dark Soul, both on 2 minutes, assuming they're playing Vision Miner at least. Then there's Rep Pally. Rep Pally is on more of a 1.5 minute cycle with Vision, but still pretty good. Frost DK, actually. Frost DK.
Yes. Frost DK is really good, actually.
They are pretty similar in terms of damage profile to Fire Mage, especially if they're playing. Like, it depends on the build that they're playing, but the way it, like if you see them wearing like a Jar's Font of Power, for instance, they are going to be on that 2-minute cycle very hard. If you see them talented into like Ice Cap, they're probably a little bit less dependent on that, and a little bit more just always doing damage. Unholy Death Knight's a little bit of a weird one. They are pretty. It's important that they're cooldownsing to be doing damage, but their cooldowns are fairly short. Their cooldowns on they're spread in between the 30 seconds and the 90-second range, and they don't always need all of them to do competitive damage either. So that it can be hard to keep track of that. So you really just ask your Unholy Death Knight what's going on. in live keys,
That's-
it's weird.
That's one reason why they're so good in MDI and Mage isn't. Like Mage is on a strictly 2-minute CD cycle. I mean, there's a new build where you can do 1 minute. Unholy DKs always have big AoE damage every 30 seconds with D&D.
Yeah.
Right.
45 seconds with Dark Transformation, which is reduced by Death Coiling and all that. So like literally every pull they can do big AoE, and then their single target is on like the 1 minute and a half CD.
I also think Demon Hunter recently has been playing that Blood of the Enemy, Fell Barrage, and Miraculous Fang build, which definitely puts them at a bursty damage, more bursty damage profile than they have been previously.
Mhm.
And like Trell was saying about like how stuff enables pulls, there's also stuff like Essence of the Focusing Iris for snap spots and Ataldazar, and just like, okay, Demon Hunter's having Blood plus Fell Barrage for snap spots and Ataldazar, where you have to allocate cooldowns to be able to pull off some of the 15 snaps to make sure that the mobs die in time.
Right. Whereas by contrast, then there are some specs like Beast Mastery Hunter, Fury Warrior, Shadow Priest, Demonology Warlock that are kind of just always doing damage, right? That they don't. The Outlaw Rogue also a good example of this, where it's really like, you know, these are specs that obviously they have cooldowns. They can just go whenever they can do big damage. They prefer to pull bigger stuff with their cooldowns, but they also just don't really care. Like if you don't tell them what their route's going to be, and if you don't pull around them, they're going to be doing okay, right? They're happy to be stuck in combat rather than setting up big pulls, right? They'd rather just chain pull and always be fighting stuff. Yeah, Shadow Priest is a little bit of an interesting example because Shadow Priest does have some restrictions, but it's slightly different than the other ones, right? Shadow Priest wants to stay in combat more than it wants to pull big, so that they can just keep their chorus, you know, being fed correctly.
And Shadow Priest can still be really strong if that was possible in every situation, which it's not. Like some dungeons you just can't chain pull. KR has a strict barrier on pulling. Like you just have to wait in between pulls sometimes. Mother Lotus is the complete opposite. Like you could chain pull all you want in the first area and really enable a Shadow Priest, but unfortunately the dungeons just aren't designed with Mythic Plus in mind like that. So you can't always do that.
They are designed with Mythic Plus in mind like that. They're not like, it's just not feasible for you to be able to pull around that one class in that exact way.
I think that describing roleplay, like role playing and waiting for mobs to spawn or whatever, I think it's fair to say that that's not. I
don't think that's designed with Mythic Plus in mind at all.
Yeah.
Well, I do think that the RP is fine. I do think the stuff like the Waycrest Manor like doors is not okay, and then like the junkyard robot moving around every single time is like less fine. But I do think like
that's cringe.
What about the 30 seconds of downtime RP for Alliance after the third boss?
Okay, Siege of Borealis is bad, but for the King's Rest Gauntlet, that's fine.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, King's Rest Gauntlet, that behaves differently on MDI than live, right? For a good reason, because on live it's just like you just randomly aren't getting the right one sometimes.
I don't disagree, but
I think they had good intentions, but the dungeons are still designed as a fantasy experience and like a roleplay experience rather than a Mythic Plus experience.
I think in Mythic Plus there should be some distinctions that are made. Like in the normal base dungeon, I don't care that Freehold is like this RP event and stuff like that. In Waycrest Manor, honestly, I don't care if it's one specific door that's always open or if it's all of them and you have like choice. But the fact that it changes like run to run is weird. Junkyard, very similar way. I don't care if it's the exact same like hard mode, like rotation the whole entire time, but just pick one kind of thing.
Yeah, I would like to see that in Shadowlands as well, where like, you know, putting a keystone in kind of standardizes the dungeon for, you know, I'd be fine with having options open, but I do think that it's there's enough variance with weekly affixes and stuff that it feels really bad to have your key just bricked by which door is open in Waycrest.
Open the middle window in Waycrest, please.
That would be awesome, man.
Dude, that would be such a cool thing actually to do for like April Fools or whatever. You zone into Waycrest Manor and the doors are all closed and the window is right clickable on to break it and jump out to the courtyard.
That'd be sick.
That would own.
I would love that.
Yeah.
So in Arcway, in the MDI, they actually had
open the middle
door. Yeah, it was like, wait, this is the most optimal path. What in the world is this?
That's wild.
I was so excited. I was like I was a pretty casual player in that first MDI, and so I saw that they did that for Arcway, and I was like, why don't they just do that on live? Like, that's so enabling.
Yeah.
I was really excited to
Anyways.
hope they did that, but
Anyways, let's talk about single target versus AoE damage in your group comp. So we already talked a little bit about how single target damage has been scaling up a little bit less than AoE damage has through most expansion-based systems. You know, corruption effects and essences and everything have been really blasting our AoE up. Like, obviously they've helped our single target too, but the AoE has gotten very good as well. Do you guys think that your group should kind of change how it's focused on single target versus AoE between tyrannical and fortified weeks? Think you should be making different choices?
I think ultimately it depends on the class. I do think that there are some changes that need to be made between tyrannical and fortified. There's also some changes that need to be made based on stuff like bolstering and whatever else, but it does ultimately depend on the class. Like, you're not going to take a 20% AoE damage loss for a 3% single target gain. It really ultimately goes down to how much damage you're gaining or losing. It's really hard to say based on like specs. Moonkin would rather play for single target damage than play for AoE. They run like a multi-purpose build to be able to do that, whereas a class like Demon Hunters, by and large, is going to run the exact same thing week to week, almost regardless of what's happening.
Yeah, you know, there are some points of optionality. Moonkin even can play, like, they can play focusing iris, right? Or if they really needed to play more AoE, right?
Yeah, exactly. And
that's not something that you do very often, though, right?
I've been playing it in a Talazar and Shrine of the Storm this week, but I'm pretty sure that's ultimately due to the fact that I'm running with a Fury Warrior as well, and so we need more AoE.
That makes sense.
But yeah, it really just comes down to your class and like how much damage you're gaining versus how much damage you would be ultimately losing. It's not just strict. Tyrannical, you play this build. Fortified, you play this build. Unfortunately, there's a little bit more nuance to it.
I think you touched on something really good there, though. Like, if you are playing with a Fury Warrior, it's not just like what trade-offs your class can make for AoE versus single target, it's what trade-offs your group can make, right? So, like, if you're playing with a Fury Warrior in your group, maybe you need to have your Moonkin take an inefficient trade for AoE damage because you've got the Fury Warrior in your group, and that is a class that can't AoE above 5 targets.
Exactly. So in a Tal'Dazar, where it is Sanguine this week, I'm running Focusing Iris because I'm going to be executing the Sards on the snap spot to make sure that we don't get Sanguine in a bad position, because we have a Outlaw Rogue and a Fury Warrior who both aren't going to be able to execute the targets in the same way. So say we had a Demon Hunter, I wouldn't have to play Focusing Iris. I would play something else.
I think the Fury Warriors can execute Tettles.
I mean, they're not... Okay, shut up. We hate Draendos.
You started saying that, and I was like, yeah, they have Dragon Roar, and then, oh, never mind, he's memeing.
Yeah. Okay. Another kind of thing, like Temple of Citralis and King's Rest are often places where people will consider playing single target builds, right? That they wouldn't normally play.
I mean, same with Siege of Borealis, because Siege of Borealis is such... Like if you're playing the dungeon the way that you would prefer to play the dungeon, you're not going to kill any mobs. You're going to let the spotter kill every single mob in the whole entire instance. So you don't really need to play for that much single target or that much AoE damage. You would much rather play for single target damage that's going to help you burn down Vikagoth tentacles in like one less cycle, or be able to get, what is that second boss actually called?
Dread Captain Lockwood.
Dread Captain Lockwood in one less cycle. Those would be two large time breakpoints that you can achieve by playing a little bit more single target damage, whereas your AoE is largely it doesn't really matter just because you're killing stuff with a spotter.
Right, you have Ashbane Spotter in your group, right? It's like having a Fury Warrior in your group. You have Ashbane Spotter in your group. She's doing all the AoE damage. You don't need to worry about it.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Okay, another thing to keep track of in your group is how much support your tank and healer are getting for the staying alive part of the dungeon, especially against certain enemies. So looking at like what your tank and healer combo is can be really relevant. And this is something that it really matters as well when you're looking, like the ability to pull around a fire mage depends on how much your tank can survive a big pull every 2 minutes as well, right? So different tank classes and different healer classes are good at this in different ways as well, right? And even then, some DPS classes can help support this too.
It very infrequently is like a large amount of DPS going to constitute as like tank healer support. Of course, whenever it comes down to Fire Mage, you can run the combo of Fire Mage Protection Warrior plus Holy Paladin to be able to set up these large 2-minute pulls, and I would almost constitute that as tank healer support.
Right, Fire Mage damage kind of counts here as something.
It's just because it is a logical extreme, but it very infrequently does DPS count as like
Right.
support in this.
It's usually the abilities the DPS classes bring that can count as support, right? So trees from a balance druid, for instance,
Yeah, tree is the biggest one.
Huge thing that really enables tanks to pull stuff that they couldn't normally pull.
Assassination Rogue too.
Yeah, Assassination Rogue, Garrotes can be really awesome for like grouping casters at the start of a pull. That can let you pull 2 packs that aren't normally pullable. Binding Shot is an 8-second route that doesn't break on damage. That is,
It's actually insane.
yeah, it's unbelievable
It's really
that
good.
thing, that thing exists. Is so strong. You're gonna see a lot of that in the MDI. But if you need to kite stuff, that is the best option for it. There are also specs that can help you kite by slowing everything. So Frost Mage, kind of the top spec for this, obviously, but things like Assassination Rogue, even stuff like Havoc Demon Hunters doing a Vengeful Retreat or Warriors doing a Piercing Howl, those sorts of things can help with this too. Although those are a little bit less, group comp. You wouldn't describe those as comps that have a slow in the same way as a Frost Mage, right? Or an Assassination Rogue.
I would say Fury Warrior. Piercing Howl lasts a long. They can keep it up on every mob.
That's true. Yeah, that is
It's just not as convenient.
Mhm. Then there's a couple of other off healing effects. So Word of Glory and Vampiric Embrace from Rep Halleys and Shadow Priests. Those can really make the difference, especially on Grievous pulls. That can be something that really changes whether or not you're living on certain pulls.
What's that one from Ellie Shaman that they can get?
Ancestral Guidance. Yeah.
Guidance, yeah.
Yeah, that too.
They don't play that in... Do they play that in Mythic Plus?
They can. They
seems
can.
a bit...
It's against Nature's Guardian, which is a self-heal when they get low that gives them a little bit of extra tankiness that can be pretty absent from that spec. But if they're not playing that, I think there's also Windrush on that row. But if they're not playing either of those, then it's Ancestral Guidance, especially if they're combining it with AoE damage cooldowns, it can do a huge amount of healing. Another thing Shaman have actually is Earth Elemental, especially Elemental Shaman. Their Earth Elemental is a lot better than Resto or Enhancement Shaman's is, because it's a controllable pet that it comes with a shield wall as well that makes it so that it'll actually last a long time. That one you can micro it out of Sanguine pools. The Enhancement and Resto Shaman Earth Ellies cannot do that. So that's that one is something that you can get you.
Bad, the best possible place for Earth Elliot that I know of is you can make more time for your group to kill the last boss of Siege of Borealis by Earth Ellieing the second Demo Tentacle that comes up and just keeping on the Gripping Tentacle. That is actually really, really strong in past seasons.
Mm-hmm. And healers can keep those Earth Ellies up as well if they have frames for it. That can be a really good thing for them to look into healing. Their Earth Ellie actually lasts for a long time too, so it can be nice. And then finally, the another thing that you might be getting support from your DPS players on is taunts and immunities as well. And the number of immunities in your comp can also affect what you can do, especially on the weeks, depending on what the affixes are too. That can be large. Yeah. I guess another thing is stuns, AoE stuns.
Yeah, I think AoE stuns is the big one. I think not most tank classes, but a couple of the tank classes that are in the meta, like Brewmaster Monk and Protection Warrior, both do also have an AoE stun. So AoE stuns are a little bit less valuable in that regard if you don't have one pre-existing. But if you don't have an AoE stun in your group, adding one is incredibly high value. Even though they are typically longer than single target stuns, so Aloe Rogues between the eyes is 5 seconds, right? Or
6 if they're deep stratagem. Yeah.
Yeah, so 6 seconds, which is significantly better than the 3-second AoE stun, but the AoE stun is better for some certain things. It just kind of depends. Cap Totem being really good too, just because you're able to drop it from range, Chaos Nova, just a bunch of different stuff.
Cap Totem, you can even drop it before you get stunned and then break yourself out of the Merekta. You can break your own Merekta snakes.
That's true.
Yeah, that's the move.
It.
Yeah.
You stack the group on it.
Did you try that a lot, Dratnos?
I've got that down to a 50% success rate. It's pretty good. Just if you ever play with me on my shaman in on Merekta, you're just gonna see random capacitor totems just flying off at random times, and then one time it's gonna hit a snake, so I'm gonna be like bragging in voice chat for 10 minutes
And then
about that.
clip it.
Yeah,
clip it.
yep.
I need this. I need this for the clout.
Like I've done.
Actually,
Yeah, good.
There's a lot of cool stuff you can do with like pre-casting an ability right before a mechanic hits a random party member, like the tree boss in Waycrest. If you're a Windwalker monk, you can pre-cast Whirling Dragon Punch and like kill your own thorn.
The same with Blade Dance too. Wow.
Yeah, you can start charging up. You can even start charging up an Iris, and like if it does target you, as long as your Iris is still on the charging up part, it won't be on full cooldown. Which does help. Okay. Another big set of utility comes with Awakened. So tell us what has Awakened really changed about what group comps can do?
So I think there's like a lot of differences in what group comps want to play which Awakened mob with the final boss. Like ultimately it comes down to where the pillar is located too. But sometimes your composition is going to be better or worse at dealing with some of the mobs. I don't think you ever really play Spirit Breaker. I mean, maybe if you have like a Warlock or a Hunter in the group, it's going to be a little bit more advantageous because you're able to taunt every single one of the Spirit Breaker casts. But because of the Dark Fury, it doesn't seem as reasonable. But Samrek is actually really good if you have a strong comp to be able to deal with him, which is the Fear guy, which we don't see a lot of people playing him with final bosses, but I believe that more people should if they do have a comp that enables it.
Yeah, so there are a lot of abilities that are really strong against Samrek. Revival, I think, is kind of chief among them. If you have a Revival for that first AoE Fear, you often don't get the second, or you beat this. You can do the second with immunities or whatever, and then you beat the third.
Yep.
And usually, yeah, like that, the first Fear on Samrek, for instance, against Yasma, overlaps with the first Soul Rend. That's really toxic. And having a Revival to just negate that ability is really big. Master Spell also does this, so if you have a Shadow Priest or a Healing Priest, you got that too. You can, completely negate the first set of fears. If you have a Warlock in your group, they can Imp Dispel. If you have a Shaman, they can drop a Tremor Totem, which you're still going to take the damage. You're still going to get feared for up to a second, but it can be good. And then besides that, there's just a bunch of individual immunities that you can use against as well, like Cloak of Shadows and stuff. Berserker Rage from Warriors. Stone Form from Dwarves takes it off you, which is mega pog. Yeah, doing that on Tournament Realm owns. Diffuse Magic from Monks. This one you got to be a little bit careful of, because when you diffuse magic, the fear, it goes back onto the fear guy and then will fear the tank if they're too close to it. So you do have to watch out for that.
And all the hunter pets.
Yeah, the hunter pets will just be running away. That's sad.
So there's also Void Weaver Malthier as a mini boss that you have. Like sometimes you want to play that with an end boss, but sometimes your composition doesn't allow for it. So say you do have a Resto Shaman in your composition or Protection Paladin, it's really easy to be able to take the spider into the last boss. You may be able to even play like 2 obelisks with the last boss if you have one of those in your comp, because it does facilitate so much additional like kick coverage that you would otherwise not have. Whereas alternatively, say you're running a double ranged comp or you're on a boss like Yasma that requires a pre-existing kick, playing that kick mob is not exactly the most reasonable thing for you to be able to do. And it's like, I would almost so as a Moonkin player, I would literally rather play the Fear guy with Yasma than play Void Weaver Malthier. Like it's just not feasible for me as a Moonkin to be able to cover that many kicks.
Yeah, that makes sense, right? You can kick it one time, you can interrupt it once.
Yeah, and it also does come down to how the fight ends up working out. I do also think that Void Weaver Malthier is not exactly great for Yasma because she'll get trapped out in the middle of the room casting, and you're like, please get to the boss. I would like to cleave you.
Right, and you have to kick it late if you want to be able to kick it with a small number of kicks, like with a small number of interrupts in your group. So that really stops it from moving nicely. Yeah, so the only way that you can keep it moving really effectively, if you do have like a prop paladin in your group, that spider with Yasma is probably free. You just have the prop paladin kick it every time instantly, and that's fine. But otherwise, it's not an easy enemy to do with that last boss. But that's something that you should be like, if you have a prop paladin in your comp, that your route should be different than Taltazar, probably.
Exactly. And then the blob, I don't think that's really comp dependent, and I think ultimately it just comes down to geometry of the room and how the fight's designed.
It can be a little bit comp dependent. I would say if you have like a fire mage, that lets you do it with more bosses, right? Because fire mages just destroy awakened bosses.
Sure. And fire mage in general is the best class in the game for dealing with awakened mobs with final bosses, because like you said, they do have just insane amounts of burst cleave on pull.
Yeah, unless you mess up your combustion, which is possible to do. I've been doing that a little bit as I've been learning Fire Mage. It's you're just sitting there doing no damage. Your group's like, "Have you combusted yet?" And you're just like, "Yes."
It seems as if Dratnos has dropped a meteor on himself and cast it into Platinum Pubbler while he takes 99% reduced damage.
It's only 90%. Only 90%.
Nice.
But yeah, it does happen. We all.
That should have been my clip of the week. Shit.
I didn't actually do that, but I have.
No.
I have cast some fireballs and combustions, which is not the play. Have I meteored the ceiling yet? Yes. Yeah, meteor. I have my meteor on an @cursor macro, so just sometimes, like, I'm not gonna know if it's gonna be hitting the ceiling or the ground. Like, that can just go in any spot.
I think it's worth special mention on the tank guy. At what point you pull him in the dungeon, whether it's by himself or with the last, you should make use of immunities in your group to remove the debuff from your tank.
Mm-hmm.
Demon Hunters, if they have meta for that pull, are 100% the play for taking the first Spirit Breaker, because you can just Blade Dance as it comes into you and then meta dodge the actual Spirit Breaker. And then your tank taunts back after that point. If you have a Holy Paladin or a Ret Paladin, or a Prop Paladin, I guess, as well, you can bop the Spirit Breaker cast. You just taunt near the end of his cast with bop on yourself, and you won't get the debuff. Then you have to cancel the bop with a macro.
Yeah.
What else am I thinking? Like, Paladin Bubble can emit pretty easily.
And then again, Hunter and Warlock both can just take every single cast with their pet taunt.
So would you want to play that boss with them if they're
You can. It is a cast, like, so the Warlock is going to have to spend a soul shard to resummon their guy. The Hunter is going to have to cast Revive Pet. It's a little bit awkward, but it does mean that you can just completely remove that mechanic. Like,
I think ultimately for me, the Dark Fury is the reason that you don't really want to play him.
It just depends on the boss.
Because
yeah,
it limits your melee uptime so heavily that it just, to me on paper, it just seems like it's not advantageous to even play him with a final boss. You'd rather use it to move around the instance. I mean, of course, that's not exactly the most reasonable thing. Like, sometimes there are bad positions on him. Like, putting him in the middle of a Taldazar is just terrible. Like, that doesn't really do anything for you, like, in the scope of the dungeon. But
yeah, it depends on your comp, I'd say, because, like, Outlaw Rogues can just keep hitting from the edge of a Dark Fury pretty safely. They don't mind that. So if your melee comp is like Outlaw, Havoc, and then you got a BM Hunter or whatever, like, maybe you can just fight Tank Buster with the last boss. Especially if your tank's like a Vengeance Demon Hunter, they can just tank Spirit Breakers as well.
Yeah, exactly.
They're like, whatever, I'm okay with this. I got Demon Spikes up. I'm immune to damage.
Or as Damson would say, I'm vibing.
We're vibing out, yeah. Whoa, yeah. Okay, let's talk about some of the other niche strategies that are enabled by certain specs and classes. So this is an incomplete list that, as Wikipedia would say, you can help by expanding it. You can, develop some more of these strategies and let us know what cool things different specs can do. But some examples of this are, like, jockeys in the Motherlode can be death gripped to pilot extra peacekeepers that otherwise weren't activatable. So if you have a Death Knight in your Motherlode run, you can even grip some jockeys next to buildings, and they will run inside the building and pilot an extra peacekeeper inside there. That kind of owns. So, look out for that. You can also do this with, like, Ring of Peace and stuff too. Ring of Peace can bounce them around. There's a different set of jockeys though, or peacekeepers that can be activated by Death Grip that is unique and awesome. There are some big pulls that, like Toldagor first pull, for instance. If you have Frost Mages and Assassination Rogues, they can even play that spec just for that pull and then switch off of it for the next one. So that's something that we've seen a lot in Toldagor, right? Is the AoE 20 mob pull depending on the week. And he takes on that move. Whether that's worth doing still this season.
Oh, it's absolutely worth doing this season. What the hell?
Well, I think if you have a Prot Warrior with Conflict Major, you don't really need to have someone swap. Like, you can keep all the mobs rooted in place pretty much the entire pull and not have to kite at all without taking melee damage as well because of the root from Thunderclap. I think there's a lot of ways to do it. I think if you have a Brewmaster tank, they're fast enough to where you don't need a slow, and you can keep the mobs generally in the same circle as you kite in a circle around.
There's also the cannons in Toldagor that are really easily done by certain things, such as, like, Sigil of Misery and like Ring of Frost. Ursul's Vortex into trees and Solar Beam is something that I've noticed is also incredibly stupid for dealing with the
or Sigil of Chains into that as well.
Into tree Solar Beam, yeah, and then you
Binding
literally
shot.
just sit there. Okay, yeah, binding shot.
Binding shot's actually insane.
Mass grip. Any Gorfine's Graspers, yeah, that
too, yeah.
that owns. So those can really enable some pulls. Having access to specs in your group like Outlaw Rogue can make you able to fight more enemies at once as well in places like Ataldazar, right? You can do like 6 enemies instead of 3, or 9 enemies instead of 6 at the start. And then in places like Underrot in Kragmaw's room, an Outlaw Rogue can handle a Lasher and a Maggot, right? Whereas other specs would have to, kind of pick and choose. So having access to those kind of specs lets you pull bigger. There are a lot of specs that can help you pull bigger in those cases, but it's kind of up to people to be able to identify how much they can actually handle with those sorts of things.
Yeah. And then the last thing we have is like Transcendent Snaps and like Tricks of the Trade snaps. Obviously, Tricks of the Trade, this is like both of these are aimed at Ataldazar, but there's also stuff like Shrine of the Storm where both of these are kind of relevant for being able to get mobs into like snap spots that they would otherwise not be in via misdirection / Tricks of the Trade, or your Brewmaster Monk like dropping a pre-Transcendence and then running through, pulling a bunch of mobs and like instant teleporting all the way back to that Goblet and Shrine of the Storm. All the mobs follow him instantly, and then you're like, all right, well, that's kind of cool.
Or through walls and Waycrest. That's a personal favorite.
Exactly.
Yeah. Have you ever done the facts snap in Ataldazar Tattles? This is
that a bad? That seems like a bad.
No,
seems
dude.
like a.
This is we created this during Keystone Masters. This snap we invented this. I think at least we definitely developed it independently. If anybody else did, where you snap a bunch of swords to a tank on the like normal, but the rest of the group has jumped down to Razan, and the rogue has tricks the tank. And then you tricks and attack. You attack Razan, and Razan snaps the tank down to Razan. Then, and then all the mobs snap again down to Razan.
There is a snap spot in Razan's room for Saras if you really wanted to do it like that.
But you can do it without using that snap spot. You can just do like a 5-second double snap. Yeah.
I guess it is on the wrong side of the room
anywhere
that you really don't want to be on. Yeah. Okay. Fair.
Yeah.
The Razan, whoever his threat target is, he just puts them in front of him, no matter where they are. Tricks in the Tank does enable that, but Sards being in the open without a snap spot's kind of dangerous too. So
right, it's really only an MDI thing because you are like gonna kill him in one Unholy Death Knight set of cooldowns. Yeah. Okay, speaking of bosses, there are some boss fights that this might not affect what your route looks like, but some bosses get dramatically easier with certain specs, right? So like Spell Reflect, for instance, against first boss of Temple, that boss just lasts 3 minutes less long on a tyrannical high key or whatever, if you have a prompt warrior spell reflecting the Cyclone strikes, than if you don't. Spell reflect against Heartsbane Triad, spell reflect against Lord and Lady Waycrest. A lot of different things that spell reflect does well. Ricks of Flex Flame even. Diffuse Magic, Mass Dispel also. Yeah. Good.
Oh, there's just tons of spell reflect. Sorry. Last boss of Motherload, third boss of Shrine, first boss of Shrine. There's so many.
Yeah.
Lord and Lady Waycrest. The big one. That guy is... I don't even understand how that happens. How you can reflect that. Oh, the slime in... the slime in Junkyard.
That one, yeah.
Dude. Yeah.
Consume
That's probably the biggest one now, huh? The consume by the consuming slime is like a 2 million damage spell reflect.
Yeah, that one, I've even had that healing absorb be useful against Sanguine this week. So, that owns.
I like that. That's actually really funny that you said that.
Yeah. Tremor Totem against both Razan and actually King Dazar can be pretty useful. Havoc Demon Hunters on Overseer Korgus, dodging every Deadeye. Really, really important, actually. Very, very helpful thing to have on that fight. People that can dodge or parry or immune the bleed against Kula the Butcher in King's Rest. Very important too. So all of those things can help you. This might not affect your route, but it can help you identify where you need to Bloodlust, right? Like, do you need to Bloodlust Kula the Butcher? The answer will depend on if your group comp just has a paladin for bop and a DH and a rogue that can dodge the axe throw on Cool of the Butcher, you probably don't need to have Bloodlust for her on as many weeks as you would if you didn't have those things, right? So that is something to keep in mind when you're figuring out what you're doing this week. Okay, another thing you get is skips. Depending on what comp you're playing, you may or may not have access to things like Shroud of Concealment. This is a lot less useful than it used to be, right?
I think a lot of people are just using it just to move around one pack as opposed to using it through like 3 packs in the whole dungeon and like missing 60 count that they would otherwise have to kill and whatnot.
Yeah, it's not hugely important. Talzar, I'd say, is maybe an exception where there are still some really good places to have Shroud there. But other than that, I'd say, yeah, Shroud is not what it used to be. Warlock Gateway, also there are some spots where you can use this. Like, you can use it to get past the thing in Freehold, the first Enforcer or whatever, but there are a lot of good ways past that now in Awakened anyway, so most of the skip value has kind of gone down compared to what it used to be. There are some cool ways that you can use stealth classes to skip with Awakened, right? So, like sneaking ahead and activating an Obelisk while your group sneaks ahead of Nyalotha and meets you there is a cool thing that rogues can do in places like Temple to get to that second Obelisk, or Freehold to get to the second Obelisk, yeah. Or another thing you can do is your group can sneak to a boss room in Nyalotha, and your stealth class can go and pull the boss, and that pulls everybody out of Nyalotha into the boss area. So those are some cool options opened up by stealth classes.
So that one that Dratnos actually mentioned about like somebody pulling the boss while everybody's in the Nyalotha realm, I would highly recommend doing that on Azerok. That's the one that like comes to my mind first, because you can bait all of the fixates onto one player if they're the one who is pulling the boss. So you send your healer out of the Nyalotha realm, and then they pull Azerok. They will get all 4 fixates onto them, and then all of them, like basically all of your melee DPS, are going to rejoice and be able to actually hit the mobs.
Yeah, that's that one. It does suck if you are that healer though, who does get fixated by 4 enemies and has to kite them. Yeah.
Well, healers aren't real people.
That is definitely true.
Just like tanks.
Just like tanks and everybody that's not a moon.
Yeah, thanks guys.
Yeah. Okay. Strengths and weaknesses also against certain affixes is worth noting as well. So bursting, for instance, if your group comp has like, Cloak of Shadows, Bubble, Netherwalk or whatever, you're going to have the ability to fight 20 stacks of bursting that you would not have if you didn't have those abilities, right? Grievous, something that really matters what your like healer and tank comp is against Grievous. That can be really important to look into, like figuring out if you're going to be good against that. Bolstering, having some priority damage in your group, so specs like Enhancement Shaman even kind of own at this.
Saying that my Fury Warrior is trolling by whirlwinding.
They have to be careful of whirlwinding, yeah. I mean, even whirlwinding, Fury does more damage to their primary target than the others compared to like. I guess they're probably one of the most AoEing everything actually. So yeah, you do have to be careful there. Necrotic, there are a lot of things that are good against Necrotic, right? So Paladins, especially prop Paladins. Binding Shot, trees, dwarves, Earth Elemental, all those things are really, really good against Necrotic. Skittish. Skittish is something where having either misdirection effects or tanks that have big snap threat. So this is like Prot Warriors kind of. Prot Warriors are in a class of their own here of like Avatar Thunderclap, just nobody's going to take threat against that. Yeah.
Whereas for Vengeance Demon Hunter, they're literally praying that they get enough threat via Twilight Devastation to maintain threat. I mean, even on non-skittish weeks, man, that class cannot generate threat if they don't have like a fat tricks on them, if people are just like smacking into mobs too early.
Yeah,
it's so frustrating to me. Like, why does a tank have to rely on an RNG proc for threat? It's so frustrating.
I've been doing my 5 mask clears as Vengeance on my DH, and I've been playing 30% health Twilight Dev beams, so Twilight Dev 5 total, rank 5. And I've been one-shotting elites with it if it crits and I'm in meta. which is it's so stupid, and it's only going to get better as well. Like in a couple months, I'm going to have even more Twilight Dev and still be under 60 corruption and just destroying the whole place with it when it procs. And like otherwise, it literally takes me a minute to kill stuff with my Demon Hunter abilities, or I can proc one Twilight Devastation and it's immediately dead.
So you walk up to the Dwarven District mini boss, you pop the meta and immediately Twilight Dev, and
he's just giggling. He's just giggling as that guy is literally dead.
He actually got 100 to 0 as well. Like it was a legitimate one shot against an elite in a 5 mask run. Yeah, that's that's my favorite thing. But it's illustrative of how it goes in Mythic Plus too, because like if you proc that Twilight Dev, you have threat, and if you don't, you're not doing any damage. So. Having misdirection is really important for Skittish. Explosive Week is also one where having super explosive classes can really help you out. So Outlaw Rogue is king of this, but other specs can also do a fairly good job of killing explosives if they need to. And if your comp lacks those and you're showing up on Explosive Week, you're not going to be in for a good time, right?
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Anyways, I think that is about our list here of thinking about playing around your group comp. I hope we've kind of helped you out identifying what to do based on who's in your group and stuff.
I think make sure that you note what Dratna said at the very beginning of the segment, where it's like it is ultimately your responsibility for like telling your group what your strengths are, especially if you are playing one of the lesser known specs or classes. There are things that, like Protection Paladin, like people just don't play with it enough. So people don't know that the Spider is basically free with the last boss whenever you run with the Protection Paladin. Bop is also OP. There's like a bunch of different stuff. There's a lot of different classes that ultimately just communicating, hey, my class is really good at this, maybe we should do this instead, can help you out in the long run.
Yeah, and even if you don't change the route at all, just communicating at the start of a poll, like I'm going to Tremor the first fear or whatever, everybody stands out on Razan, like that owns. Right?
Exactly.
Whereas if you just kind of if you don't say anything and then your class, like if you're not using your abilities to do those cool things, your class is not doing anything special, right? It's not doing anything, and then what's the point? Anyways, that's been our main topic this week. Let's do some Q&A. Again, reminder though, before we start Q&A, we're going to be live probably Wednesday rather than Saturday next week. Time still to be determined. Follow our Twitter at Titanforge WoW. We will make a tweet and announce it there. We'll announce it in our Titanforge Discord as well. So we'll announce all that. And either way, whenever we record it, it could be Wednesday. It might be a different day. It'll be on the audio feeds the day after as well. So question and answers. We have one from Vitamin P in chat who asks, how helpful is Prot Warrior Spell Reflect on the first boss in Underrot after the boss nerfs? Mostly on Tyrannical. We tried running a different tank on the Tournament Realm and lost no time there.
So I don't know if it's necessarily a time save. I think on whenever you're like legitimately pushing keys, I think the like extra kick that you're going to be gaining will probably end up saving you like maybe one blood bolt over the course of the whole fight, especially if you have a ranged near comp. Like then it will actually save you one blood bolt. So it's going to save you a little bit of damage taken, but like does it increase your speed? Probably not.
Not much, right?
It adds like 250k damage hits to your damage as Prot Warrior in an MDI setting. High keys, I think more so though in Underrot is the Spell Reflect on the Death Speakers. Just instantly kills them all.
Spell Reflect on Death Speakers is insane actually. Yeah, it completely demolishes them. But yeah, it's not very much against the others. Against the first boss anymore.
Right.
Okay.
It's not like super influential as the TLDR.
Our next.
I think Dratna and I both on the exact same thing.
Yeah. Our next question comes from Twitter at Ragnarok Dez, who asks, "How old is Trelsky?"
Yeah. What the hell? I opened my Twitter yesterday. And there's just a random "How old am I?" question off of like. What was it, a Titanforge?
Yeah, it was a Titanforge.
Yeah, it was our tweet. Our tweet here is asking about if you have any questions, and the questions here are just how old is Trell? So then Trell replies, "I'm 27. What on earth prompted that question?" And then Gardenark says, "Trying to figure out why you can't grow a beard."
Shut up.
That is toxic.
This is definitely
I
not
love
like
it.
a week's worth of not shaving. I don't want to talk about it.
Now, speaking of not shaving, not having a haircut is really, really feeling bad right about now.
All right, so Janice, I'll cut your hair if you cut mine. Okay.
All right, that's a deal.
All
That
right.
is a deal.
This can't go wrong.
Yeah, we'll have to figure out like a way to cut each other's hair remotely. Maybe we can get some like robots that we can control through VR at our own places that cut each other's hair remotely. That would All right, I think that. Oh, we have another one. Okay.
We have one more.
Question from Pancake Bunnies in Twitch chat. As an outlaw rogue / DPS, how much of a benefit cost do you get out of pre-potting every pack? Trell, do you know the numbers on these off the top of your head?
That is a good question. Since there are so many pots this expansion, it's really hard to quantify. But I think roughly on average, a pot should save you like a couple of seconds or a boss. More so on a boss. Like single target pots are pretty important.
Yeah, definitely on single target, it's more important. I know in Legion, one full group usage of a potion was about 2 seconds off the timer relative to the damage that you gained. That was a full 5 group use.
I feel like Unbridleds are more than that. Like a full group of Unbridleds, I think takes more than 2 seconds off the boss fight.
Okay, so, well, to me, it seems like Unbridled would probably be less ultimately. Just because of like how people's damage is scaled relative to potions, because like we had like potions of prolonged power, which were pretty good in Legion, right? Maybe they were less good.
Unbridled is a large percent of your damage, though. I do think that the AOE potions aren't really that important in terms of like I think that those are less impactful, but I could be wrong. I haven't done the analysis on this. It's just how it feels from looking at numbers afterwards.
Those feel very unimpactful for me.
I do think generally, when DPS tell you to wait for their potion, they're usually throwing the key. Usually you're losing more time than you would gain by potting, by waiting for pots.
Something that I don't see people use enough is the 25-second like main stat potions, especially on fights that have like really strict times that they want to burn, like the second boss of Siege of Borealis or like Vic Goth or something like that, where the 25-second potion is just going to be significantly superior because your burn window is so narrow.
Yeah, absolutely. That one, I think you're right. Like, you know, people are like, well, Unbridled is my better single target potion, but like, if the boss fight, if the important damage is in 25 seconds, it's probably not. Okay, another good question here from Cardinarch. Can any tanks answer? How do you properly set up Spell Reflect for Cyclone Strike? It seems like if you don't do it correctly, you get clipped and killed. Trell, how do you set up like this?
First of all, it's wild that this is even possible. I don't understand how this is allowed in the game, but there's 5 instances of Cyclone Strike that go out, like 5 total tornadoes and an arc in front of the caster. You can only do it if it's targeting anyone else but yourself for some reason. So if it's targeting you as a tank, do not try to Spell Reflect, you'll die. But if it faces someone else and does it, you got to move yourself like into the boss's hitbox, just in front of her, him or her, I don't even know what she is, but if you're like inside of the hitbox and right in front of the mob, it'll reflect all 5 cyclones. Otherwise, you'll probably get hit by a couple and die.
I love Dreadness's reaction to that.
Yeah, you do have to also be careful if a jolt goes through on you when you're reflecting, your reflect will be consumed by the jolt, and then you'll die to the Cyclone Strike. So that can randomly own you as well. Do kick those jolts. Yeah. Most comps should be kicking every jolt, by the way.
Okay, kick the jolts. Best tip of advice if you're a melee kick with like short arms, like T-Rex arms, like Warrior, put the target on focus. Don't melee him.
Yeah.
And also, like, kick him from max range so he doesn't melee you. Like, literally, you have to make sure that you're max range, put him on focus, and then focus kick him so you don't melee him. And those 3 things, and you will be golden. If you have a range kick, then it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. It's on a minute rotation, so you can even solar beam every single one as long as it's the same one in the rotation.
Yeah, you can solar beam every first jolt or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I was solar beam 3rd jolt because that locks him out long enough to send him straight into static shock, so you don't have to have a 4th kick.
Yeah, although you can play like a shaman lockout or whatever to force the 4th cast if you want it to do that for a little longer.
If you want the phase for a little bit longer, but I generally like to phase them a little bit quicker, but you can do whatever you want.
Yep, it's a free country. You can choose however many jolts you want to cast on that thing. Yeah. Anyways, I believe that is it for our show this week. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. Let us know what you thought of this topic. Give us any feedback you have in our Discord. We're happy to talk more about these kind of topics. But we hope this kind of scratched that itch that many of you talked about wanting to talk about off-meta comps more. That's going to be all for us this week. We'll be back later this week even. in like
We will
5 days.
tweet about it.
Yeah,
at the
follow our
time.
Twitter for when our next show is going to be. It's still not quite determined. But that's going to be all for us this week. Bye, everybody.
Till next time.